Welcome back to Crime Besties, to another episode. Here we are for episode 20, Emma. Did you realise that?
I did when I was writing it down, but I am I'm a bit proud of us actually to get to 20 episodes. When we first started the podcast, and I was doing some research into what makes a successful podcast.
Yeah.
One of the things is posting consistently, which we've been able to do.
Yeah.
And also, a lot of podcasts start and might have 3, 4, 5 episodes and then stop.
Yeah.
And so, the fact that we've reached a 20 episode milestone, go us.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, you can totally understand that too, because I think we worked out too, we thought, this is easy to do, start a podcast, everyone does it, but there's definitely lots we've learned doing this. It's been in some ways harder than we thought.
Oh, definitely.
And so we've had little hiccups along the way and stuff, but to then stick at it and keep pushing through all that to get to here where, we're recording today with, fingers crossed every time that our audio is great.
Yeah.
And that we've got, little bits of new equipment and stuff along the way. It's pretty cool. Go us.
Yay.
Well,
and thanks to everybody for listening for 20 episodes, because if we didn't have people listening to it, I don't know that we'd be still motivated to make more and more episodes. So thank you.
Analytics keep going in the right direction. So, it's obviously we're picking up a few extra people along the way, which is nice.
It is nice. I bumped into one of the dads at school pickup the other day.
Oh, yeah.
And his wife had obviously told him about our podcast, and he's like, you know what, I'm going to give it a listen. I'm like, well, thank you very much. So, hopefully that, as people start to hear more and more about it, we get more people on board.
For sure. No, I love that. And even one of the teachers who walked up to us the other day went, oh, it's my Two Crime Besties. I'm like, this is really awkward. Please don't tell me our kids have been talking about it at school.
We don't let them listen. Don't worry. Our kids do not listen to the podcast. We might let them listen to the first minute or two while we're just chatting about things, but none of the serious stuff.
It's funny though, because I have let them listen to the intro episode I think we did. Obviously I let them listen to that because there's nothing in that, and then maybe a few intro bits of various episodes, and so Brody's started recording his own podcast.
Oh, I love it.
Very gorgeous. He totally gets into it and gets on his iPad and video records and video records.
But what does he podcast about?
Oh, well, one of the that he recorded, it was in the car. It was bloody hilarious. And he's like, so this is the podcast about everything. And so topic number 1. And starts really on topic number 2. And he gives a sentence on each thing. And it's
oh, I love it.
Because he goes, because I know everything about everything.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Of course he does.
I think I'd subscribe to that podcast. Everything about everything.
Yeah, love it. Hey, there's an idea for a spin-off for us at some point, maybe.
Oh, spin-off. Oh, come on. Brody needs his own episode series. Come on.
Anyway, I think we mentioned this in our episode last week, but we again have had a few people reaching out and asking how they can support our channel.
Yeah.
Again, best way to do that is to subscribe using your podcasting app. So best for us is in Spotify or in the Apple Purple podcasting app.
Yes.
But we've actually also set up a Buy Me a Coffee site, so there's a link to that in our show notes below if you would like to provide a financial contribution. There is absolutely no pressure. We're doing this for fun and we love it, and we love the fact that everybody's joining us every week. But that link will be in our show notes if anyone's interested.
That would be amazing. As you say, that hitting that like or subscribe button is really our ultimate. We know people are listening and that'll keep us going. But obviously there are expenses, I guess, involved in this as much as we're willing to outlay those things because we love doing it. But that little bit of help towards any of that sort of stuff is fantastic too.
Yeah. So thank you to those who've already had a go.
Yes. Yeah. We definitely need coffee in the morning to get started on these podcasts sometimes,
especially when we're recording. We're rushing straight after school drop off today. We're going to try and get our record done before we go and watch our little ones do their school swimming for the day. So just trying to fit it all in.
Yeah, jam everything into a day.
Yeah.
No, and that's the thing with this. We're getting quicker at doing it. I find when we record. So we can achieve more in a Friday when we record these.
That's
days.
right. Do you remember back in those first few episodes? It would literally take us the whole school day to do a recording.
Yeah, we'd be like, oh my god, shit! It's already 3:00.
Quick, let's go.
Yeah, after we've recorded and stuff because it took us forever to get everything sorted. We have to stop and start various points. Whereas
Yeah.
now it's like, got this.
We have got it down.
Yeah.
So hopefully this will take us less than, well, what do we got? An hour and a bit and we'll be done. So on that note, let's get into it.
Because its case is actually bigger than we thought, I reckon.
Every week we say to each other, oh, there's not that much in this one. And then we actually look into it and start researching. And we're like, oh, actually, I think there is.
Yeah. I think maybe it's our fault. Maybe we just talk too much too.
That might be part of it. I'm sure you know from the episode title, though, today we're talking about Jennifer Pan. There's been a Netflix documentary recently released called What Jennifer Did on Netflix. I think, did I just mention that? Which is, it's really good. It's a really well-produced not even series, it's
just a doco.
Yeah. But I found it very one-sided.
Yes.
And they definitely had an agenda, as I guess these things tend to do. Like it's told from a certain viewpoint. And although I can absolutely understand where they were coming from in the way that they presented the documentary, I think there's so much more nuance and context to this case that wasn't presented in that. And that's kind of why we decided to do this episode now.
Yep, that and did you notice the AI images that he used in that documentary too?
Well, Netflix have come out and said that it's not AI, that it was actually they used digital altering of a photo because they wanted to anonymize people in the background of the photo.
She has 2 thumbs in one picture.
Yeah, and then the spacing between her fingers in one of them is real weird.
And her tooth has been fixed in one pic too.
Yeah.
They're definitely like
they've
more
touched them.
Yeah, well, it's a bit more than a bit of Photoshop. I when you look at it, because there's one where she's she's holding up a peace sign in each hand.
Yeah,
and one of them she's got too many fingers.
But also one of them her fingers are way longer than
they're way
the other ones.
But the multiple fingers and stuff is usually like an AI indicator.
But why would they do that? Like, what's the point?
Again, is it about portraying her a certain way? They wanted to show her as a bubbly person, maybe, is like fun,
maybe,
I don't know, not really sure of the agenda or behind that, but yeah,
interesting,
very interesting. And then to not, I guess, acknowledge it, like that, that they did do it, is really unusual too.
Yeah,
I think they're wording behind it. I think the director said something along the lines of like, all documentaries like do Photoshop and stuff. It's like, well, I don't know if they do. I mean, that's the whole point of a documentary, is that it's fact. It's why we watch those a lot of the time over drama series and things like that, because you actually, you expect that you're getting facts from it.
Absolutely. Yeah. You want to know that what you're watching is, fairly true to events.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's get into the case. So Jennifer Pan was born on the 17th of June in 1986 to parents Hann Pan and Bich Ha Pan. They were of Chinese Vietnamese descent and they were immigrants into Canada. So this took place in Canada.
Markham, Ontario.
Yeah.
So just out of Toronto,
yeah,
I think.
20 k's or so out of Toronto.
Yeah.
And so Bich Ha and Han actually met in Canada. They were both refugees and had met in Canada, and very quickly, I think, had a very quick courtship and
I have a funny
married.
feeling they actually did know each other back in Vietnam.
Oh, did
before
they?
moved to. I don't know that. Yeah, I don't know. There was some stuff I read about potentially they may have met prior.
Okay.
Through maybe family connections or something.
Right.
Like
okay.
But yeah.
But anyway, they decided to get married and start a life together in Canada.
Yeah.
And which they did. And then they had Jennifer, and then 3 years later they had a son named Felix. Mm-hmm. He is not mentioned in the documentary at all on Netflix, and there's a lot of reasons behind that, which will become more and more evident as time goes on. But he just doesn't want to be associated with any of this, and I can completely understand why.
Yep.
So this took place on Monday, the 8th of November in 2010.
Yes.
There's a lot that leads up to that date, but let's start there.
Yeah.
And we'll go through the events of the day, I think, and then we can sort of look, go backwards and look and see exactly why that happened.
Yep.
So I guess the first bit is we hear this 911 call, and I had to double check that Canada's emergency number was 911, but it is. But yeah, so we hear this 911 call of Jennifer contacting police because she's heard these popping sounds and she's been tied up and she doesn't know what's happened, and she can hear in that 911 call, which again you can go and you can either listen to that in the documentary or it's on Facebook, YouTube. Yeah,
any of those.
It's online. Yeah, Google it.
Yeah.
And you can hear her dad in the background like moaning, isn't he? He's like, that sound is horrible.
Yeah.
And he then runs out the front door. Knowing Jennifer's in the house, which is also very curious.
Yes.
But basically Jennifer's account of the story is of what happened is that that night her mum had gone line dancing.
I love that.
Good on her.
Yeah.
Apparently Bich Ha didn't do a lot of things for herself, but line dancing was like her one thing that she absolutely loved. She loved music, loved dancing, and every Monday night.
Cotton Eye Joe when I hear of line dancing. Cotton Eye Joe, we married a long time ago.
Oh God, don't get us started. Now there's a tangent we could easily go down.
Yep.
And so she's gone out Monday night. I think she left home at about 6-ish or 6:30. She's then home by about 9 o'clock. Prior to her going to line dancing, she cooked a meal. She and Jennifer ate that meal. Hann had actually been at work that day. He was a machinist, a tool and die maker.
I think they both worked at the same place, the two of them.
Bich Ha didn't work there anymore. She'd actually been made redundant about 2 years before this incident, but she had worked.
They had worked
she
together.
had worked in the same. It was for an automotive car part manufacturer.
Yeah.
So they were very hardworking people. Hann had been at work that day and he'd come home. I think he was a little bit late coming home because on his way home, he realised he'd not locked his toolbox or something. So he's gone back to work, done that. And then on the way home, he's called his brother-in-law because he needed to go to Bunnings or whatever the Canadian version of Bunnings is.
Yes.
So hardware type store to pick something up. And so he went with his brother-in-law there. He's come home, eaten the meal that Bich Ha had left for him because she'd already gone off to a line dancing class. He ate his dinner, went to bed at about 8:30 because I think he started work really early, like 5:30 in the morning or something.
He said he'd go to bed earlier than usual, but 8:30 was in bed.
Yeah. Bich Ha gets home, I think it was around 9 p.m, 9 or 9:30 p.m. from line dancing. Jennifer hears her mum come home and goes downstairs. This is Jennifer's account of what happened. She goes downstairs to say goodnight to her mum and then goes back upstairs to essentially go to bed.
Jennifer was on a phone call then to an old school friend, I believe.
Yeah, so she'd had a fair bit of contact with friends throughout this night. She'd had one friend had come over during the night to watch some shows that they'd recorded. So they watched, oh God, now I can't remember what they were. They were shows that I was like, oh yeah, I remember watching those in 2010. But, sort of soapy type things. Yeah. And so they watched those and then the friend went home and then Jennifer's had text message exchanges with one friend and then she's had this phone conversation with another. So at this point...
Bich sitting on the couch, soaking her feet after a big lot of line dancing.
Well, she's probably there for 3 hours. That's a decent
go
at it.
Yeah. Soaking those sore feet, absolutely. Yeah. She's had a ball and had a great night, enjoying her thing. Love it. But then at about 10 o'clock, all of a sudden, in walks through the front door with no knock, no nothing, and Bich believed the front door was locked. However, these people just walked straight through and this is where the shit begins. So they grab Bich and take her straight down. There's 3 men, take her straight down to the basement. Hann, who is in bed at this, as we said, he wakes up to a man with a gun in his face telling him, where's the money, where's the money? And he's absolutely, woken from a dead sleep. So he gets dragged down to the basement as well. Apparently, this is when, according to Jennifer, she hears these voices that aren't her parents and sort of opens her bedroom door and sort of a little bit to sort of check what's going on. And she hears footsteps coming up the the stairwell, and as she opens the door, there's a person there with a gun, and who grabs her. They grab her, and then they tie her up to the banister. They tie her hands together, and then tie her to the banister.
So the way she describes it is they tie her upper arm to the banister. So she's got her hands tied behind her back, and then her upper arm is tied to the banister.
Yeah.
Meg, what did they use to tie her hands together and her arm to the banister?
Shoelaces?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Yeah.
Criminal masterminds. Anyway.
So she's upstairs, according to her, and so she has no idea what's then going on. So there's then like 3 floors to this house, in that there's the basement, which is a used space in this house.
It's like a finished basement.
Yeah, they use it as a sitting room and things like that.
I think it's got a TV down there.
Yeah.
Yep.
So but Bich and Hann are down there. So all we get now is Jennifer's story of what she hears is 2 pops, which she thinks could be gunshots. She hears her mum scream. She then apparently hears 2 more pops. And then she hears them go out the front door. She thinks that they're gone, and she can't hear. She hears her dad moaning, I think, a little bit, but then nothing. So then she reaches behind and she realizes that her phone is in her back pocket. So with her hands tied behind
in her waistband.
Yeah. So with her hands tied behind her back and her tied to the banister, somehow she gets this phone out and dials 911. Sorry, wrong country. So rings 911, and then that's when we get the 911 call that you hear of her. It's pretty intense, that 911 call of her screaming, sort of, that someone's in our house, and that she needs help.
There's been shots. There's been popping sounds,
and you hear Hann.
The 911 operator says, is asking her for her address and asking her what happens. She sounds like a little girl in the
because we haven't mentioned.
reporting.
I guess we have in terms of her age, but I don't know if people put together that at this point in 2010, she was 24 years of age.
24. Yep. She sounds like a little girl. She's terrified, and given the events that have unfolded, understandably, I mean, some intruders have come into your house. You can hear shooting sounds. They've been demanding and yelling about money, and yeah, she would be terrified. So again, go and have a look, either Netflix documentary or even better on YouTube. You can see just this clip of the video.
Yeah.
But when she's interviewed by police following this event, she demonstrates how she got her phone out of her waistband and made the call despite the fact that she was tied up, because she was saying she was tied up really tight so she couldn't get out of it.
Yeah.
But she was able to get her phone out of her waistband, put it to her side, and flip it open, the old-fashioned flip phone.
Yep.
And dial 911 and then speak to the operator. Now, there was no speakerphone on the phones at the time.
That's what I was like, I actually was Google searching, could you just put it on speaker at that point in 2010? There was no speakerphone. No. So
what she says is she turned the volume up all the way and she was yelling at the phone. Now,
I immediately, that doesn't ring true. When you hear that voice, that 911 call,
it sounds like
it's very clear.
Very clear.
She's very clear. I mean, I've heard plenty of other 911 calls where someone is got the phone here, which you don't get as clear as what you got from her, that message.
So it's not to me, she's not twisting around and yelling down at the phone. It's her voice is very clear. But anyway, this is her account.
Yeah.
And the 911 operator says to her, what's your address? And she's not forthcoming in that. She stumbles around the question.
Which I get, you can kind of understand that in some sense of a traumatic event. That she has said it, but the 911 operator couldn't
really
make it out.
You
can't, which, I mean, I can get it. You think you've said it, but they haven't understood it. So I kind of can come at that.
And the trauma
but
of
she
it.
does she does stumble over it a lot, kind of thing, that you kind of like,
and then eventually the 911 operator's like, spell it for me.
Yeah.
And she does. Anyway, they dispatch police immediately.
Yeah.
And the 911 operator stays on the line with her until the police are there. So you can hear the police in the 911 call. You can hear the police entering the property.
Yeah.
You can hear the police officer coming upstairs and obviously doing a sweep of the house to ensure that the intruders aren't there anymore.
She sort of said to them, even as they came up the stairs, I don't know if they're still here or not.
Yeah.
So, yes, they've got to check everything. So, obviously, if this was legit in terms of things, but she, that would be pretty intense as a victim, that you're tied to a banister and finally someone comes to arrive and you think you're going to get free, but they don't. They leave her there, which they have to because they need to make sure that everyone is safe before they. I mean, she is safe at that point. Even though of course you want to get out of that situation, but they'd have to leave her there while they check all the rooms and things, and then also check how she's tied. That's part of just protocol to then how they're going to untie her safely or what have you. So they've done that properly. I should say before they walked in, the police obviously into the house, they found outside was Hann Pan, passed out on sort of the nature strip, I guess, sort of out the front and the lawn there. So he's been shot. I think
in the face,
in the face,
and in the shoulder,
as well. It was 2 shots. He'd copped. One of them particularly right through the corner of his eye.
Yep.
So he how he got up and got to there is pretty full on, and how he managed to get that far.
Like the adrenaline must have been pumping. So he's actually climbed the stairs from the basement to the ground level of the house and run out the front door.
Yeah.
I think in some ways, luckily, a neighbour was actually leaving for work at the time and intercepted Hann and could already hear the sirens, knew help was on its way.
Yes.
And so he stayed with Hann until the police got there, and obviously the police had to do a sweep before they could even attend to Hann. By the time, so the police tried, so they've gone down into the basement, found Bich Ha and knew immediately that she was deceased. They did try to perform CPR on her just, as a life-saving measure, just to try. And once the ambulance, the paramedics got there, they basically knew that she was gone.
And she'd been shot in the back and in the back of the head.
Yep. So just absolutely horrific.
Horrible.
Hann, as you said, had passed out by this stage out the front. Upstairs, the police officer who'd found Jennifer decided, obviously had had a bit of a check of her and everything, and found some scissors in her bedroom and cut her free using the scissors, trying not to,
disturb
too much of the crime scene, but obviously wanted to free her in the same token. So anyway, was able to cut her free in that way and took her out the front immediately, where she saw her dad on a gurney ready to go into the ambulance. And then they've taken Jennifer to another awaiting ambulance so that she could receive any medical attention that she would need. She didn't need any, aside from, she was treated for shock at the scene, and they took her to the hospital to give her a once-over. They didn't know at this point whether she'd been raped or harmed in any way. And so, they were doing their due diligence by ensuring that medically she was okay after this horrific incident. Yeah. So they were taken in separate ambulances to the local hospital, and at this stage, Hann is in a really, really critical condition. Yeah. The bullet missed his carotid artery by literally millimetres.
Yeah, 'cause I think it came through the corner of his eye and then down through his throat.
Exactly, but it was the angle. It was like slightly angled away from his neck. Yeah, so it was like angled out towards the outer side of his body. If it had been angled slightly more inward, he wouldn't have survived.
No, just incredible.
Yeah. To this day, he's still got bullet fragments in his...
Yeah, you can't see out that eye. No. Oh, he's got lost all vision of that eye.
Yeah, so there's obviously some ongoing, ongoing physical trauma, let alone the mental trauma.
I guess so. It's still at that point, like they didn't even know if he'd still, survive. Yeah. There was still a long way to go. They were, so in the hospital, I think family members arrived as well. And Jennifer was with him in the hospital. And at one point, Jennifer realised that her phone battery had died, and she even asked one of the her uncle, I think it was, she said, my phone battery's died and I want to ring someone.
That actually happened when Hann came to.
This was on the night of, I thought.
No, it happened on the date, because they've then traced that was part of the prosecution's case. Yeah, because they then were able to see that she phoned her ex-boyfriend. Daniel Wong, and they know it was now to tell her?
Because on the night, it was on that night because she rang him and said he's going to live, which they didn't know.
Yeah, no, I am sure that happened when he woke up. Because on the night that it happened, he did not know. They didn't know. They thought he was going to die.
No, that's
it was
right.
Like critical.
That's what, I'm sure there's part of the interview with her that comes up, and she said, "Oh, I was ringing him to tell him that my dad was going to live."
Right.
And it was like, well, hang on a minute, because you didn't know he was going to live.
Yeah. So why would she ring to say that?
Yeah, that was part of the another question mark. Like that made them. I don't know. Okay. Don't know. All right, we'll have to look that back up.
We'll double check that.
Yeah,
fact. But at some point, she's called Daniel to say that he's alive. We'll get to Daniel.
It's not crucial.
No,
by any means, no.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think 3 hours after all of this, the police take her down to the police station to do an initial statement. Which again, at this point, it's just protocol that she is the only witness they have to this, to then be able to follow through and find who these people are that have come into a house.
Yep.
And do this. They've got to interview her, which they are. I mean, look, that is completely intense, and police are very aware. And I have to say, I think they did an incredible job of supporting a victim of crime. They have these particular people who get assigned to a victim like this that support them, as well as those who have got to do their job and interview, because you don't know who's involved in anything in these sorts of things at this point.
Yep.
Because, as we should say too, where this occurred, I mean, crime was very low.
Yep.
This was really unusual for it to have happened. A home invasion of any sort was non-existent in that neighbourhood. So immediately, even when the media got hold of this, it was a big story, because they were like, who on earth would have done this? Because people don't have home invasions in that area. And so it was like, well, if this wasn't related to the family, just a random incident, like, that's scary for this neighbourhood, particularly when it's not something they're used to.
They were looking to see whether the family had connections to drugs or like gangs or, something to motivate a crime like this, but there was nothing.
Well, very early on, one of the neighbours, when they started talking to other witnesses, trying to, what did you hear over the night? A neighbour said, like, well, Jennifer's ex-boyfriend has drug relations, so that came up quite early. So they were aware of that, and I don't think at that first interview they were aware of that.
No,
but
that's why they brought her in, I think, for the second interview. So, the first interview took place at Jennifer was discharged from the hospital at 1:30 in the morning and taken straight to the police station for interview. The interview started at 2:45 a.m. and finished at 4:30 a.m.
It's pretty lengthy. Like, I mean, because they took it slow for her, I guess.
But to think of what she'd been through. So, a couple of hours worth of like quite intense questioning, and they were just trying to establish a timeline of basically what had happened, whether Jennifer knew anything, whether there were any leads that they could potentially follow up. Because as you said, this was just so seemingly so random, But very early on, the police were questioning things. There was two different camps, basically, between the cops. There were those that were, absolutely like, oh, this poor victim here, like, but there were certain cops going, I think she's in on it. Yeah,
because to have people to enter a house and murder or attempt to murder two people. Why would you leave a witness who saw you? That was their biggest, I guess, red flag.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, this was incredibly intense, and you can't treat her immediately as like, you're a bad person, and like they've got to tread carefully, because in case this is just completely random.
Yeah, that's it.
In her interview, she did give descriptions of 3 men who came into her house. So they basically labelled them man 1, man 2, man 3, because they don't have any names for these people yet. And she was able to give a description of each man that she saw, and that she definitely heard certain them talk, that one had a Jamaican accent, one had dreadlocks, all these sorts of bits of information. The interview itself, I mean, it's all over online, like very easily access to it. It's worth having a check out, because her demeanour immediately, to me, raised quite a few red flags. The first one being that there's a box of tissues on that table. Now, I can only imagine how I would be feeling. I've just had my mother murdered. My dad's in hospital and quite possibly could die. How you would be feeling right then would be full on. I'm sorry, that table would be full of wet, gross, disgusting snot tissues. Like,
Oh, absolutely. But then I guess the other thing is just putting aside what we know, you don't know how you would act. You would
no,
behave
you
in a
don't.
trauma like this.
So you can't
She'd be
completely.
exhausted. It's, between
Yep.
2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
You'd be in shock, absolutely be in shock, and you don't know how you would react. Although, because apparently when she was awaiting to go into the ambulance back at home, she said to the police officer, "What happened to my mum?" And the police officer said, I'm sorry to inform you she's deceased." Jennifer just went, It was like, okay, again, how you would process that, I don't know. The shock of that would be so intense, and you would almost feel like you're not living in reality, would you?
God, yeah.
But
another layer of this that I guess we probably should say is that both you and I are white, Australian, culturally background. We don't have great insight here into another culture that we're looking at here in terms of their family being Chinese/Vietnamese background, different cultures, raise children differently.
Yep.
And I know that from only speaking of from friends' experiences of being raised in households like that where that emotion isn't really allowed, and that they were.
It's not like it's a cultural thing, isn't it?
It can be a cultural thing that you don't cry.
Yep.
And things like that. So I think we've got to also
put that lens on it.
As well, that we're talking from a different cultural background as well, and that I don't want to say that is a very generalized statement. That doesn't mean that every Asian household is that way either. So, but that has to be taken into account from the police side of things of when they can't judge someone's reaction, as you're saying,
and nor should they. I mean, the police are there to gather facts.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, people's demeanor plays into an overall picture.
Yes.
But I think the detective on this particular night at the first interview, he was really good in sort of taking everything in.
Yes.
And when he's interviewed in the documentary, you're like, okay, he got it from the get-go.
Yeah. But I think the thing with the tissues where I was going was she would wipe her, she would cry.
Yep.
But the tissue would come back dry.
She wouldn't cry. She'd put her hands
down as if she was crying.
Yeah.
But then the tissue would come back dry.
Yeah.
So that's what I was kind of like.
And so that was a
difference
red flag.
between okay, I don't cry because whatever reason, how you've been raised or something. But then there's fake crying.
Yeah, it's performative. She thought that's what she should be doing and how she should be feeling.
Yes.
So this is the way I'm going to portray myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Felix, Jennifer's brother, he was about 30 minutes away at college at the time. So he was not living in the house. He was living away at college, but it wasn't very far away.
Yeah.
So the police actually brought him in for an interview around the same time as Jennifer.
Yep.
And I mean, he didn't really have a huge amount to add to.
Well,
he had no idea of what had happened that night, but
Yeah.
he did start to paint the picture in his interview of what their parents were like and what their family dynamic was like. So that, again, helped, as you were saying before, helped kind of put together a bit of a picture about what this family dynamic was. And, one of the things that he said is their dad was really quite strict and very difficult to live with. He had very high expectations of them.
Yeah.
He basically expected them to be the best in their class academically. He wanted them to be musical and play instruments. They were only able to do extracurricular activities that he deemed sort of noble. They weren't able to necessarily just go off and, tool around on a basketball court after school. They had to be doing something productive with their time. The pressure of that must have been horrendous.
Yeah.
Jennifer, when she was younger, was a figure skater, and she ended up having to pull out of that because she injured her knee really badly.
Yeah, she was on track basically to be looked at for Olympics. She was very good apparently, yeah.
In primary school, she was training until 10 o'clock at night, coming home and doing not homework assigned by the school, but homework assigned by her parents.
Yeah,
till midnight or whatever, and then getting up and going to school the next day. They pushed their kids so hard. Hann has been interviewed about this.
Yep.
And I mean, not that he's had a huge amount to say in the public arena, but I believe this was actually formed part of his testimony at trial as well. But there has also been an interview where he basically stated that they put everything they had into these children financially, not emotionally, that wasn't the word he used, like physically. So they drove them everywhere they needed to go. They put everything they could into these kids at their own sacrifice. So they hadn't gone back to Vietnam to visit family because they were putting all of their money into getting a better home in a better area for the kids, ensuring that they could pay for the top education, and like giving them all these extra tutors for different things and the best piano teachers and whatever.
Yeah.
So it's building a picture of very, very high expectations. This is going to sound really dirty, but I was looking at Reddit in relation to this case because I am curious to see different opinions that people have. And sometimes if you just look at the comments on like the Netflix documentary or something, you're not really getting a whole scope of what people think. Reddit is great for that. You've got to filter through a fair bit of stuff. But people were saying on there that, you know, the expectations that the parents had didn't match necessarily the parents' background. So as in the parents were blue collar workers and they expected their children to achieve academically incredibly, like a lot higher than they ever had.
So the reason for that is this whole idea of like the Chinese Vietnamese background, and I sort of am bucketing them together in that, and I don't want to generalize, but there's a lot
in
of
this
similarities.
Instance, we're talking about it.
Yeah, but they've got connections to both culturally, but also Vietnam and China have a lot of cultural similarities.
Yep.
But the basic reason for that is that in their culture, education is your out, and basically that the only way you can improve your socioeconomic status is through education. So that's why education has such a high emphasis in their culture. So you can be the, you know, lowly worker, but if you can make your child, if you can provide them education, that will improve your socioeconomic status. And so in Vietnam, in China, you can find a lot of like politicians, etc., medical people that have backgrounds of very poor families.
Okay, I get that.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to me that they had that opinion and yet they had, in blue-collar jobs, worked their way into having a home that they owned outright. There was no mortgage left on that home at the time of the murders. They had worked one of them owned a Mercedes, the other one owned a Lexus. Yeah. They had $200,000 worth of cash in their bank accounts. Yeah. They had sent their kids, thought they'd sent their kids to university and were able to assist in their tuition payments. The kids still had student loans, but it was nothing compared to other kids because their parents were able to assist in contributions for that. So to me, they're an absolute success story on the back of a blue-collar job, and yet they didn't see it like that. They've wanted their kids to be... They wanted Jennifer to be a doctor, but she says that it was too gruesome for her. She doesn't like the sight of blood.
Dad did acknowge that and goes, you won't be able to stomach it. So that's when
he decided that she could do pharmacy instead. And I believe Felix studied engineering.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So her brother,
So he was at university at this time studying engineering at a very prestigious university too. I don't know the name of it, but it was quite a well thought of university he was at. Yeah. But like generally speaking, like, because we're putting like quite I guess a westernized look on this lens on like what this would be termed tiger parenting in some ways.
Yep.
Or authoritarian parenting. There's different names in it, but they definitely overlap somewhat. That we would feel awful at the idea of our child feeling stress. You know, if we were putting on pressure on our child, that idea of like our child feeling stressed would be like, oh my God, I'm not doing a good job because my child's stressed. Whereas potentially in that kind of style of parenting, culturally, your child feeling stressed is actually a sign of you doing an excellent job as a parent.
Yeah, because they're striving, they're working really hard, they're doing what they should be doing to get to achieve what they need to achieve.
Absolutely. I mean, there's like elements of tiger parenting that I 100% go, okay, I really like that idea, right? But it's when I put like a westernized spin on it, I guess. But the idea of like that, they believe that effort should be given more what am I trying to say? Like the effort is more important than the actual result in some ways. Now, so I read that as like, oh yeah, like you praise the effort, and I do this with my own children. I praise effort over the result. You can fail at the end of it, but you put in all the hard work, therefore you haven't failed because you've learnt a new task, right? Whereas they see it as no, you everyone in their minds, everyone can do anything as long as you work hard enough at it, right? There's no like innate strength someone has. No, you can do everything and anything as long as you work hard enough at it. So,
and that is exactly the environment that they've raised their children
absolutely.
in. Like
So
they
just
had no
because-
extracurricular
Yeah.
activities. Like they were constantly striving for the best.
Yeah.
Everything they did was to try and achieve that.
Yes. So
Okay.
regardless of the fact of, that, okay, yeah, medicine isn't your thing. You don't like medicine. No. You work hard enough, you can do it.
Yeah.
So there's no like, oh, you don't have a passion for that. Oh, let's look at something else. Whereas like I'm more of the idea of, okay, you find something that you're passionate about. You don't work a day in your life, right? You can work hard at doing that because you love doing it. It doesn't feel like it's hard work. Their idea is if you're not working hard, then you're not achieving.
Yeah.
The only way you're achieving is by working hard.
Yep.
So there's actually a grading system that I've heard a friend of mine talk about this in her household around like tiger parenting, and she's Vietnamese as well. And she said that basically A equals average, right, in the grading, B equals bad, C equals catastrophe, D equals disowned, F equals forgotten.
Oh my God.
So even when you're achieving as high as you possibly can of an A grade, you're still not good enough because you've got to work harder.
So I think that's what even Han said this in one of his statements, that he wanted them to be the best.
Yes.
It wasn't good enough to get A's and whatever.
No.
They had to be number one.
Yes.
And so much so they were actually quite disappointed that Jennifer didn't finish top of her class one year, like as valedictorian of her class. And this is kind of where things started to unravel for Jennifer.
Yeah.
But they were really disappointed that she hadn't finished top of her class and someone else had achieved that.
And I think, unfortunately, I think teachers had almost indicated to her that she was going to receive that, whatever that I call it. I think I would call it ducks, but it's not valedictorian.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So different countries call it different things. But I think it was alluded to her that she would be receiving that award at the end of elementary school, and she didn't get it, so that kind of triggered what her high school life then became.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So she had gone from being a really clever, high achieving.
Yeah. She was getting A's and A pluses
in primary school to moving on to high school, where things, I guess, there's a big jump between primary and high school, different the way, even the way classes are structured and the content. And you are then, by the time you get to high school, we all know, we've all been there, you're working towards potentially like further study or a career or whatever. So,
but also hormones kick in. So.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a very complicated time of life, isn't it? But Jennifer's basically gone from being this A-plus sort of student in primary school or in elementary school to then sort of being a B or C average student.
And apparently she, like, with not getting that valedictorian, basically had this attitude of, like, why try?
Why even bother?
Why bother? So what did she do to make sure that her parents believed she was still doing the A's and A pluses? She started forging her report cards at the age of 14 so that her parents believed she was getting the A's and was incredibly intelligent. She was averaging a C at the time.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I'm trying to work out. In 2000 and whatever year that would have been, early, mid-2000s.
2004 maybe.
Sort of stuff. She was able to use Photoshop skills to be able to turn a C into an A. I mean, wouldn't you go a B? Like, wouldn't that be easy to shape?
But she wouldn't have been able to go home with a B.
A B still would not have been
good enough.
So the effort that would have gone into doing that, I think, why don't you go into some sort of field of, like, I don't know, graphic design or something?
Play to your strengths,
clearly
Jennifer.
Good here. Yeah.
She forged so many documents over the coming years.
Yeah.
She forged, so she's gone through high school. She actually never officially graduated from high school because she failed her final year calculus exam.
Yeah.
And so she was one credit off actually graduating from high school. Prior to that, though, she had actually received an early entry offer into Ryerson University. I think just studying a general science degree, was it?
I actually can't remember. I just
I
remember
think it was. I think it was just a general science degree. Her parents were happy with that. So they wanted her to study pharmacy at the University of Toronto. That was their dream for her.
Yeah.
But the fact that she got early entry into Ryerson Uni, they were actually okay.
I think
they
they
were
were
proud
already.
of that.
I think they were already knew she wasn't going to get the marks to get in immediately to pharmaceutical studies at Toronto University. I think they already were aware that that's not where she was at.
Even though she was getting, they thought she was getting all A's.
I think so, but I think it wasn't still good enough to get her into that. So I think
Right.
she's already had to tell them that I'm not going to get into there, but if I do a couple years at Ryerson doing this, then I can transfer across.
Yep.
She'd already
figured it out
of what she was going to do. So
and
again,
I guess, image-wise, which I know plays a part in this as well, her parents were able to say, well, she gained early entry, they wanted
Early
her.
entries,
And
yeah.
I think she originally was offered a $3,000 scholarship. So some
well,
money,
she told them that.
some money
know if that's
towards
true.
it. Well, she was definitely 100% she was originally offered early entry. I
Yeah.
think the $3,000 scholarship has never been either proven or
proven or not.
disproven.
Yeah, I'm
Nobody
not sure
really
if that's-
knows because Ryerson actually withdrew their offer when they found out she didn't graduate from high school.
You have to have your high school diploma to be able to move into university. Yeah.
Yep. So she still went. So her parents believe she'd graduated from high school with really great marks and that she was going in to Ryerson University to study science for a few years as an alternate pathway, I guess, into pharmacy.
Yeah.
She buys all the textbooks. She attends, she tells them she's attending the orientation week for the university. They drive her there.
Yeah.
And drop her there.
Yep.
But she doesn't have a place. So during this time, so this was 2 years of her life that she was doing this. She was doing lots of different things, but not actually attending university. I think now's a good time to introduce Mr. Wong into the picture.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
So when Jennifer was in high school, she was part of a music program and they went over to Europe for what was that for? Do you not remember?
It was some
like
sort
for
of
some concert or
thing.
something.
Yeah, yep.
And on that trip, she met a boy named
Daniel Wong.
Thank you. I was just about to call him Eddie, but that's another guy. That's another character in this story.
Yes.
Daniel Wong, and they hit it off straight away. I think she
had an asthma attack because on this trip people were smoking because in Europe was far more, considered fine over there more so than back home. So a lot of the kids were picking up sort of a bit of smoking over there and stuff when they travels. And she apparently had got quite a nasty asthma attack. And Daniel was apparently fantastic and really got her away from it, calmed her down, got her over this asthma attack. So they just sort of bonded over that immediately and really connected. Yeah, so I think she sort of fell from him pretty quick. And he was a year older than her, I think.
Yes, a year older.
Yeah. They didn't start dating immediately. They became just good friends for a long time. But as soon after them getting back from that trip, I believe they started dating.
I think it was about a year after the trip.
Yeah.
They started dating,
Yeah.
but Jennifer wasn't allowed to date.
No.
I think she was 16 at this time when they
right.
sort of started dating.
It could have been early. Actually, no, it would have been more like 14.
Okay.
She must have been pretty young at that point.
Okay.
When they first met. Yeah.
Yeah. They were having to sort of go behind Jennifer's parents' backs and, sneak around. But so this is during high school time. But by the time Jennifer doesn't graduate from high school and moves on to not Ryerson, Danny was actually working at a pizza place at the time and as a manager or something, Boston Pizza, and he got her a job there. So
eventually got a job there.
Yeah, eventually so during the day she'd either go and sit in a cafe and have a lunch. She'd go to the university library and just sit and tool around and use the internet there. She would take lunch to Danny on his lunch breaks before she got a job there. Not really a productive use of her time. She was earning a bit of money that her parents didn't know about by working at this Boston Pizza. She also was teaching piano to family friends. So she did have a pretty modest income. So she had a little bit of money at her disposal, but her parents were also supporting her in that they were giving her money for different bits and pieces for
Thinking she was a uni student.
university. Yeah, that's it. Like, you know,
helping
sling me
her out.
$50. I need to be able to buy lunch today or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah, so she kept this ruse going and going and going.
So in that time frame too, Danny at one stage was put over by police what he was doing was selling marijuana. He was found with I think about half a pound of marijuana in his car. He did do a little bit of time, I think, or he was arrested.
I think he was on probation. I think, yeah.
I don't think he actually went to jail or
No.
anything, but yeah, he was arrested for it and everything. So he was known to police in some form. It was sort of in that scene a little bit of, buying drugs and selling drugs, etc. But obviously with Jennifer said was that because, this asthma attack kind of thing that she had with smoking and things, he said to her, you stay well away from it. She wasn't involved in it. But still, not great.
When she was interviewed about this I believe this was her second police interview.
Yeah.
It really made me take note because the detective says to her, were you involved with the drugs? And she's like, absolutely not. I had nothing to do with it. She was so resolute in what she was saying.
Yeah.
And then, a few minutes later in the interview, they say something about, well, did you have any involvement in the death of your mother?
Yeah.
And she's like, and she kind of is like, oh, well, and she really skirts around it. So I believe that she had no involvement in the drug side of things with Danny, but obviously we come to learn something else. Yeah, it was such a juxtaposition between her reaction of when she absolutely hadn't done something to when she had.
When she's such a good liar.
Yeah.
Because, she's lied, for a number of years. By the time she's in this interview room about this incident, she's been lying consistently for 10 years about her entire life.
Not only to her parents. It comes out that she's been lying to Danny. Everyone. She's lied to friends, family.
Yeah.
Nobody really knows the truth of her life aside from her. But I also truly, truly believe that there were lies that she told so many times that she believed them herself.
Yeah. There's got to be a level of that. Yeah. Yeah. Which we can chat about. I've got a little bit of info on what we maybe think of diagnoses of things.
Yeah, we can. Maybe we'll get to that more towards the end.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're basically now at the point where Jennifer's at university, university, at Ryerson, and it's time for her to kind of then move on to the University of Toronto to study pharmacology. And the web of lies just continues.
Yeah. Yeah. And at one stage she volunteered, told her parents that she was volunteering at a hospital doing blood draws and things like that or something.
Yeah.
Which floors me that even that someone would volunteer and do that. You could actually volunteer and actually get that role. But anyway.
Yeah.
But her parents started cottoning on to this fact that the dad was like, well, hang on a second. To do something like that in a hospital, you need to have, badges and stuff to swipe in and swipe out. You need a uniform,
scrubs or something.
Yeah. And she didn't have any of that stuff because she was still living at home. There was none of that stuff being seen. And so he questioned this. And so they drove her to work one day to drop her off, which they did multiple times. But on this particular day, he said, Bick, you get out of the car and you follow her in and watch her go in. To which then she's bolted into the hospital and hidden for hours inside the hospital.
3 hours in the emergency department she hid.
Oh, God. Just to avoid this sort of situation. But the questions started coming then at her of what was going on. That was sort of her downfall. She did at that point fess up that, she wasn't attending university. She didn't have that job, So they did find out at that point
that she wasn't attending the University of Toronto. They still at that point believed she'd attended Ryerson.
Yeah, they thought that's right. So they're basically like, well, I know, because they did find out, her parents did find out at some point that she hadn't even got her GED.
They did. That was later.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But eventually
it kind of all came out very, very slowly
as things unraveled for her.
But they basically said to her at the time, right, so they've become more and more strict. They've figured out, okay, you're not at the University of Toronto, you don't have this internship or this whatever volunteer job that you say you've got.
Yeah.
So you are going to now work to get in to the University of Toronto.
Yep.
They've made I think they've put a curfew on her. Yeah. She's not allowed to go out after 9 p.m. or something. Now, by this stage, she's an adult.
Well, this is it. And also they've also know already that at one stage prior to that they found out she was dating Daniel Wong, which she'd already had massive arguments over that with their parents that one, she wasn't allowed to date anyone, let alone a guy who only works at a pizza restaurant and is a drug dealer. Like, I don't blame him.
He was studying engineering.
He was
I
also.
believe.
Their belief was he wasn't going to be able to provide a life for her. I mean, I'd be a bit anti the drug dealing situation as well. But
100%.
the fact of him working in a pizza shop and studying, I don't have an issue with that.
Not at all.
But and particularly at her age, I guess, that's an issue. But yeah, so they had already forbidden her from continuing a relationship with him, and all those sorts of things as well. So
is this the point where they gave her the ultimatum? It's either Danny or us.
Yeah, pretty much said to her, yeah, like, so here's your choice. Basically, you can go be with Danny. You can leave, and that's it. We cut ties. Like, you move out and you're on your own. Because we should say too, while she was at university, she was telling her parents that it was too hard for her to do the travel back and forth and to commit to her studies. She would stay at a friend's house, Topaz, and on some days of the week, I think 3 nights a week or something like that.
I think it was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday nights.
Yeah,
she would stay
there
with
Topaz. So cool. So apparently, and then the other nights of the week she was at home with her parents. So, and her parents were okay with that because it was about her studying and everything. But the dad actually rang Topaz. That's when it really came unraveling for her, because he rang Topaz to say, well, thanks for supporting our daughter and helping with that. Topaz, what a narc. Jesus.
Total narc.
Totally let loose.
Okay, so this makes me think, because Topaz is like, she's literally never stayed a night here ever.
No, wouldn't you word your friend up and just say, hey, I'm going to hang out at my boyfriend's?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So Jennifer hasn't even had this conversation with Topaz to go, hey, mate, cover for me, please.
Oh, because I mean, if you, I can imagine us, we weren't teenagers knowing each other, but we would totally tie each other's back.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what you do with your friend.
Yeah, so she totally did not carry through the lie and said, oh, no, she hasn't been living here and don't know anything about it.
She actually said, she's never stayed here for one night.
No. So he's found out that she's been staying with Danny that time, which his family even, they were lying, she was lying to them, saying that her parents knew about this arrangement, that she was going to be staying there 3 nights a week, and they were like, great, let's do dinner and let's catch up with your parents.
His parents wanted to meet because, I mean, this was obviously quite a serious relationship. It had been going on for years, and his parents obviously liked Jennifer and welcomed her into their home.
At this sort of point, they'd been sort of on and off dating for like 8 years.
Yeah, a long time.
Like, so... wouldn't you then embrace this relationship then?
Yeah. But then Danny kind of got fed up with it, didn't he?
Like, he respected the fact that her parents were like, this isn't going to work, like, kind of thing. And he did, I think, all you could do in that situation. If Jennifer really was going to keep her family in her life, I think I need to bow out. I think that he maybe just wasn't as in love with her as she was with him.
I think that's true.
As well.
I think that's true.
But, yeah.
I mean, he obviously cared for her, and that comes out over the course of the events that happened and the events that unfold. He obviously had some care for her.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think she was more into him than he was into her. And basically he'd had enough. By this stage, Jennifer's 24 years of age.
Yeah.
She's got a 9 p.m. curfew. She has to call him off a SIM card that her parents don't know about because her parents still confiscate her phone.
Yeah.
And it just as a 24-year-old man, or he would have been 25, 26 at the time, of course you'd be like, this is just too much for me. I just can't. So I'm bowing out of this.
Yeah.
And so he's done that.
Yeah.
He's broken off ties with her. She is still, I would say, obsessed with him.
Yeah.
Everything she does is to sort of
win him back.
But he meets another woman named Christine. I was going to say Caroline. I think you're right. You're absolutely. It is Christine.
Yeah.
And in February 2010, he starts dating this Christine.
Yeah.
And he, by all accounts, things were going quite well between them. But Jennifer decides to put a bit of a spanner in the works, and she rings Danny one day and says to him that she answered her door, and a man who was dressed as a police officer came in, and a couple of other men came in behind him, and they gang raped her.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I'm sorry, what?
What?
And he's like, and Christine sent them. It was all Christine's fault.
Yeah.
So
apparently she had sent her a message on Facebook or something as well, like, hey, stay away from a boyfriend, like,
yeah,
kind of thing.
fair
like,
enough.
We're happy.
Stay
So
away.
kind of
You've
like,
broken up with him.
yeah.
Like, leave him alone.
But that was used then as her evidence to Danny of like, it was her, she's telling me to back off and all this.
Didn't Jennifer also say that she received a bullet in the mail or something from Christine?
Yeah.
Oh, like weird shit. And none of this was true.
None of it was true.
She was never gang raped.
No.
Christine never did anything aside from send her a message to say,
one or two text messages or a Facebook message or something to say, back off, like, she's mine now. Like,
yeah, that's it.
I don't think there was anything much in that in terms of that. But but oddly enough, Danny starts getting threatening messages, and so does Christine, but so does Jennifer. Like, so there's this, who's sending these messages, which came into it a bit of like into the interviews about Bich and Hann's attack, because it was like, we've been getting these threatening messages. I don't know who they're from. Like, could this be the person who's, now done this crime? So yeah, it was like, well, a bit odd. Like, but she sent messages like bang, bang, bang. Mm-hmm. Well, he received messages like that, but quite threatening messages then. And like, so the cops were a bit like, it's curious what's going on here.
Interesting. But Jennifer used that as an in to contact Danny as well and be like, well, I've just received, she was sort of appealing to him to sort of look out for her and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's an incredibly complicated.
Oh, it's a web of lies that she has absolutely created there. Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So basically, at this point, the cops have really got a picture here of a girl who's lied for 10 years about her entire life. She's led a complete double life. There's Danny Wong, who's got connections in the drug world. And so there's no other things that are in this life that would indicate someone that would come into a home and commit this crime against this family. So they start sort of peeling back the layers a bit more on all of this. And as that sort of starts unraveling the next thing happens is that 3 days after this, Hann Pan wakes up. So he's been in an induced coma for 3 days, and he wakes up. And not only does he just wake up from his induced coma, this miracle occurs. He remembers everything about that night.
Yeah.
Which, I think they were basically told by the hospital, even if he does wake up, chances are he's going to be potentially impacted quite severely, cognitively from this, where the bullets, gone and things. So don't expect much, He came out bang.
Well, apparently,
knowing and remembering everything.
The police thought it was quite almost amusing because he's woken up from this coma and they go in to interview him thinking he's going to be like lying down. He's sitting up in bed. Yeah. I mean, he was
beer and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and apparently like he couldn't speak very well or speak.
Yep.
Yeah. But he was sitting up in bed like a man who's been shot in his face. He's still got bullet fragments in his face and his shoulder. Yeah.
And he also apparently one of the very first things he actually said, I think it may have been to a nurse or someone, was, I don't want Jennifer coming anywhere near me.
Yep.
Like something along those lines.
Although they did call her and she did go to visit him.
Yeah.
But she was like, the police also at this time, they obviously had their suspicions and they did not allow Jennifer to be unaccompanied with her father. So there was always somebody in the room whenever she...
Well, you don't be a bit nervous of what she might not even just speak to him about, but pull a plug. I don't know.
So this is the bit that really gets me. So we'll talk about the police interview in 1 second, what came out of that about that. But when Jennifer went to see him after he's woken up from his coma, she asked him for money.
Yes.
Like $1,200.
Yeah.
She was like, I've got to pay my college tuition.
Yeah, but that I'm not
which
going
isn't
to.
actually real.
No.
I need $1,200.
Yes, that's right.
What? You absolute fucking dickhead.
Oh, yep.
Like, OMG. So that just goes to her
Dad,
attitude.
how are you feeling?
Yeah. Are you okay? What can we do? Oh my God, we've got to plan Mum's funeral. And in this time actually as well, in that 3 days that Hann was in a coma, because father passed away. So he was a very elderly man at the time. I think he was in his 90s.
Yeah.
And he actually passed away, and the family think he passed away from heartbreak because his daughter died.
Oh.
Bless.
That just... So, yeah, like... this man what he's just gone through, to also then have to break to him. I mean, from what I can gather, and again, it's very culturally that, generations of families, they are very close. So to break it to him that his father-in-law has passed away and his wife is passed away. I mean, I think he already knew that because he found her, obviously, when he came to, apparently, and this is from his account of events, like we knew that he somehow got out the front, but he said that he saw her feet immediately when he came to, and knew that she was dead, and that's when he made his way out the front.
And he said there was so much blood.
But yeah, oh God.
So
Awful.
His account is really interesting.
Yes.
So at this point, obviously, the only eyewitness the police have been able to interview is Jennifer.
Yeah.
When he's interviewed, he actually says that at certain points throughout the ordeal, he sees one of the assailants like whispering gently to Jennifer. Jennifer was just walking freely around the house. She wasn't bound at this point at all. And so he obviously he thinks Jennifer's involved right from the get-go and tells the police as much.
He was adamant from the get-go. He could see that she was.
And he basically, apparently he said to the police, you go and do your job. I've given you what I need to give you. You go and use your police skills. Yeah.
Yeah, and get her.
Yeah.
Yeah. He knew straight away.
Yeah.
So the other bit of evidence they did have as well, which, I mean, it aligns with what Jennifer was saying, was that they were able to get some CCTV footage from a house across the street where they can see 3 men entering the house, again, without any force. They walked straight through that front door. And they can see the 3 men. It's very grainy footage. So there was absolutely no way of identifying these men as being, that her description of them was accurate or not. But definitely 3 men, you could see very grainy images exiting the building, exiting their house as well, and what time. And so the times definitely married up of what she was talking about. But what that also married up to were text messages and phone calls that were being made on the night. So, there was lots of, so that along with then Hann's witness statement, it all came into
Jennifer had like a burner phone. So she had her main phone, and she gave the police authority to look into her phone records for that.
Again, that was very interesting in the interview when the police officer asks her for access to her phone, basically to look at, and rightly so, again, thinking that she's very much a victim in this situation, to kind of go like, what time did certain things happen? And he was talking to her about the fact that they would do that to be able to see, you might think in days later there was someone you're talking to that this might relate to, that there is someone who has got, a grudge against your dad or your mum or, something. So they might come up in a few days time that we need to then go back to the phone and go, that's who that person is. And we might be able to track that from that number, who that person is and where, he goes, we need to have that information, which you'd hand it over, wouldn't you? Oh. She questioned it, something shocking, didn't she? How far back into my phone are you going to look? What are you going to look at?
Who are you going to contact from there? Because sometimes I call my teachers and he's like, well, we're not going to be contacting your teachers. We're going to contact people who are relevant in this case. Yeah. Like, we're not going to just ring everyone you've spoken to in the last 9 days, although... Well, who knows? Because the other thing that is interesting, and this as the interviews go on, so she was eventually interviewed 3 times by the police. First time, immediately after, no real suspicions of her. Yeah. Second interview, they've got a lot more information. They've spoken to Danny, and they're sort of starting to really form their case at this point. One of the main things they wanted to get out of them was how on earth did she make this call? From that, they pulled her in to really ask her about that. Yeah. But she, by the time they get to the 3rd interview, they've discovered she's got a burner phone. Mm-hmm. They ask her about that. And
I think that might have even come earlier because she admitted to the fact that to contact Danny because I think it might have been in the 2nd interview they were talking about it, saying, well, they knew that there was a relationship with this Danny Wong, that he was a name they needed to look at, that she'd already said to them, I had to use a different phone. Danny gave me another phone, an old iPhone, so I could contact him and I'd take the SIM out of that and use that and things like that. So she'd already admitted that she had additional phones. She must have had more than that though, because
she had 3, I think, in the end.
Because it was obviously the one that she was sending the text messages to Danny and Christine, the threatening messages. So that wouldn't have been the same one that she was legitimately contacting Danny on, and then the one that her family knew about. So it's got to have been at least 3 that she was using. Yeah. Which again, I mean, I wouldn't even know. I don't know how to do that.
And also like the fact that she's keeping track of all that. This must have been exhausting for her.
Well, to be honest, the worst thing that I would have not wanted the cops to see with looking into her phone were her gross, sappy messages between her and Danny. Have you read
Yeah.
the monkey?
Mm-hmm.
It's revolting.
It's gross. But I also,
shit.
the other thing, yeah, so do I. But I also found that it was really juvenile. And I was like, maybe these are text messages from when they were in high school. No. But it wasn't. It was from when they were in their, like, they were recent. They were within the 6 months. No, not even. I think it was like 3 months prior.
Yeah.
So Danny's with this other girl at the time. With Christine.
Yeah.
And he's sending these fucking sappy ass text messages.
It was I was like really vomiting.
It's something that I would have sent to my boyfriend when I was in year 7. Like, it's not.
I would never have.
As a 24... Oh.
I'm sorry.
As a 24...
Sorry, I'm changing my opinion of you. You can't send messages like, this is really gross.
I'll read it out and I'll tell you whether
I'll try not to vomit. I would rather listen to a story of like someone being disemboweled and murder any day of the week than this crap. Like
we've got a true crime podcast.
I know. But this is mushy. This is so gross.
Okay, go.
Okay. What is it, monkey? MUNKY. Pokes monkey side. That's from Jennifer. And then Danny Wong. Huh? What's a wrong? From then Jennifer. Squishy face, craving attention. Jennifer. Chickens go cluck and monkeys say. Danny. Ooh, 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 me. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Jennifer. Me's nose-used monkey make me's sound. Maybe no harm.
Okay.
It goes on.
I have literally never sent a text message like that.
I'm glad to hear it. So, yeah, that's the kind of stuff. That's how they spoke, like full baby talk. Vomit.
It's gross.
It's gross.
But also way below their years.
Beyond, like immature.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean,
but then that, you know, the control that Jennifer's parents had and the way they limited her, they wanted her to be young. They wanted her to be like that. But then in limiting her like that, I think that's created this absolute pressure cooker of a situation that has resulted in what has then come. I am not saying there is any justification for the fact that what we now know is that Jennifer ordered a hit on her parents. She has been convicted of murder in the first degree and attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Her and her accomplices, which again we'll get to in a sec in more depth, but nothing, like literally nothing, justifies the fact that she has brought that upon her family. One of the things that I find really interesting though is that her parents, so they've given her this ultimatum either it's Danny or us, and she's chosen her family. But her family have also never set her up to be able to live in society as a functioning adult. So she's had a curfew on her. You know, she's 24 years old and she has to be home by 9 p.m. She still has to practice piano for a certain number of hours a day. Yep. She's so controlled. She's so tightly bound within the confines of that house.
Yeah.
Now, okay, she has lied to her parents. This has been found out. But at the end of the day, she's an adult. What control could they possibly have over her?
This is the thing. So that style of parenting that we were talking about, so there's actual research that's been put into this, right? So so children that grow up in that controlling environment of their parent, that when they're overly strict and punitive, some of the effects of that are that they have an increased risk of anxiety, low self-esteem and depression, more likely to be psychologically maladjusted, have difficulty in decision-making in their own life, have difficulty forming close relationships with others and finding like themselves.
Okay.
And fending for themselves as well in terms of like standing up for themselves in situations.
Absolutely, yep.
They have a greater fear of making mistakes, so they don't want to disappoint anyone, and have a lower sense of family obligation, lower grade point average, which is a complete opposite of what they want. Yep. A higher level of alienation and a higher level of academic pressure, obviously. Have an increased risk of self-harm and suicidal behaviour among particularly Asian children, and young adults. And they have issues with self-discipline, as they were not taught how to do that for themselves when they're children.
That's my point. Like she hasn't had the opportunity to learn how to be in the world
No.
independently. So she wouldn't have even had the tools within herself, I don't think, to be able to leave that family unit.
No.
She hadn't been brought up. Like, you know, one of the measures of success for me as a parent is that my kids will be able to be functioning, you know, well-adjusted adults who can contribute positively in society
without your
my
intervention.
Without needing to call me every 5
Completely
minutes and ask me what to do.
Yeah.
Like that's a huge thing for me. And
so, and the thing is that research has also shown there's a whole flip side of that though, which is what I think really drives them with this wanting to parent like this, is that there's a whole heap of research around that. The fact is that Harvard University, the most prestigious university, I think, in all of America, maybe even the world potentially, 30% of freshmen of their intake is Asian, whereas only 5% of the population is Asian.
oh wow, okay.
So in Australia, there's been studies done on children who come from Asian backgrounds and from then Australian backgrounds. Asian children are more likely to particularly in maths. Maths is probably the highest one. Are more likely to achieve 2.5 years higher worth of learning than an Australian culturally raised child.
Wow.
So it's interesting. It goes down to about, I think, it's at least a year ahead of Australian children with children from an Asian background. So there's definitely, academically, there's certainly outcomes that are valid. But when it comes to the emotional background,
I was going to say academics don't make a person though.
No. So emotionally though, that impact is huge.
Yep.
So, and then whether or not and then it comes down to what you deem as successful in terms
Absolutely.
of your parenting.
Yep.
And I guess from potentially in a household where you're raising a child like that, their academic success is what you were wanting to achieve, and you achieved it.
Yep.
In a different household, it might be that the success means that you are independent and able to function in society, all these sorts of things in a positive way. Then maybe not so successful in that, unfortunately. Yes.
Yeah.
But so what was also I was mentioning there too is that Jennifer also did a lot of self-harm. Which a lot of people then actually then link to suicidal, but it doesn't necessarily. So because when you're self-harming, you're actually not wanting to hurt. You're wanting to hurt yourself to a point where and create pain for yourself, but not to actually end your life.
Yep.
So there is a difference, and that it's believed that she was purely doing self-harm of like some cutting, I think it was.
Yeah, it was cutting.
Yeah. So what that's also an indicator of though is a borderline personality disorder. So put my psychologist hat on. So borderline personality disorder hampers a person's ability to regulate their own emotions, right? So there's lack of impulse control, extreme mood swings, and they see the world very black and white. So there's a lot of potentially that's what's going on here with her, and not necessarily would that be triggered by the tiger parenting.
Okay.
There isn't really maybe a connection between the two.
Okay.
So if she's got that environment, but also got borderline personality disorder, that's where this combusted from.
Right.
Potentially.
Well, there are a lot of children of tiger parents who don't go on to kill them. So there's obviously a lot of complexity at play here.
Yeah.
And as we said at the top of this episode, this is such a complex case and it's very nuanced. And, you know, as you said, it's not something that we can understand because we haven't been brought up in a family like that.
Yeah.
But again, not everybody who's brought up in that kind of environment, in fact, most people don't then go on to conspire to kill their parents.
And I mean, I have to wonder, like, her brother didn't do this, kind of thing. He was raised in the same house. But
although he's a boy and she's a girl, so there were different expectations of them.
There were differences in how they were treated.
Yeah.
However, if you've got a 14-year-old who is mucking around and doing things and like, not that they knew at the time that she was forging her report cards, but I dare say there were other behaviours going on. They knew that at 14, 16 and stuff like this, she was dating a boy that they didn't want her dating, all these sorts of things. To get to 24, still living under your roof, and you find out she's not been to university for years, all these sorts of things. As a parent, you've got to go, what the hell? What do I do to get you back on track? I'm not advocating for them doing what they did in terms of setting those boundaries, but I, in some way, can understand them.
Well,
What on
they were
earth?
desperate, weren't they?
Were desperate to try and get their child back on track of like all the, like when you go back to who she was before 14, she was, you know, exceeding in her piano lesson. She was exceeding in her ice skating. Clearly, she was probably more physical able than academically able, I think, and that's maybe where they potentially went wrong in that side of like, in rather than, but then she got injured, so that's, I don't know, piano could have been something, a passion, I don't know, but I don't know. I do question that whole, like, I can understand somewhat them putting in these boundaries for her. And they did give her an out and said, you know, you can move on, like move out and be on your own.
But they'd set her up to not be able to be out and be on her own. So I feel like she almost didn't have a choice in that respect, because what would she have done? You know,
well, she could have moved in with her boyfriend, I guess.
Yes, I get that. But she had then no backing, and, you know, she's been told her whole life that her family is everything. Yeah. She couldn't turn her back on that. Like, her core beliefs, I don't think it would allow for that. Yeah. Or what she was told her core beliefs were, because I think you're right when you were describing some of those traits. She didn't have a sense of self at all.
No.
She kind of just let everyone, she adapted her personality and her behaviour to the person she was interacting with.
Absolutely.
She didn't have that true sense of self, which you develop over those high school years. Yeah. But she'd already started at that point lying, and that kind of became her core, who she was. Absolutely.
Oh, God, yeah.
So basically, just really quickly to wrap this up, because I've just noticed the time, and you know, we've been chatting for ages. But she basically, through Daniel Wong, she has arranged for, and he have arranged for these men to come into the house and kill her parents. Yeah,
she attempted once prior with someone else.
That ended up being fake.
Oh.
Yep, that was fake. So that was with...
What?
That was fake.
I've read that in multiple places.
Ricardo. This was Ricardo. She says, this is her account, and it has now been 100% disproven.
What?
She says that she paid him $1,500.
What?
Who would kill someone for $1,500? I mean, surely there's more money in it than that. She states that he took her money and left, and she never heard of him or saw him again. The police have found him since, interviewed him. They know for sure that she actually lent him $200 to go out one night. So he was an acquaintance of Danny Wong. Yes. And so she had given him money that he hadn't paid back, to be fair. Right. $200. But she had never, and he swears, and I'm not quite sure how the police validated this, but they have come out and said this never happened. Never happened. And she never gave him the $1,500.
No.
But
who on earth would do it for $1,500?
Yeah, literally no one.
Even the $10,000, which these three people ended up doing this,
agreeing at $5,000 a pop. Well, so $5,000 per parent.
Yeah, exactly. Split 3 ways. Well, split 4 ways, 5 ways. How many ways is it going?
I think 4 ways. Like if you include Danny in it, which I'm sure he took his cut, being the organizer.
What? Yeah, that's.
But they've rented a car. They've purchased guns, so that's eating into your profits, isn't it? Yeah. And the idea was that they would actually take $2,000 at the time of the invasion. Yeah. They actually took $2,500.
I think it was like $3,400 they ended up getting, but that was from around the house.
Yeah, that was a combo of the money Jennifer had for them. Yes. And then money they'd found.
But they left all sorts of other money around the house.
Yeah, which is bizarre because they've gone in there going, we want your money, but have not then looked for all the money.
There's money out on the table apparently even. Like, let alone wallets.
Bich Ha's wallet had like $280 or something in it. Yeah. So they've gone out with, it was a bit over $3,000, I think, in the end. Yeah. And then so the idea was that then Jennifer would pay them the remainder when she got the inheritance in their life insurance. So
basically she was, and that's what they say was their motivator, was that she was would inherit, there'd be the house they owned outright, the two parents, a car each, like as in like there was her and her sibling would obviously go halves in all this. So there'd be a car, which would be a Lexus or a Mercedes, like a nice brand car. So a fair bit of money there. Plus there was a $1 million life insurance policy over the two of them. So then it would be $500,000 of that she would get. So decent.
And she'd pay them the remainder of the $8,000. Yeah. When she got that.
More than that out of $500,000.
When she got that settlement. one of the perpetrators was named Leonard Crawford, and he was known as Homeboy.
Homeboy. Oh, so 2010.
Homeboy. Yeah, so he was kind of, I think, the main guy.
Yeah, he was the contact kind of thing. They sort of say that Eddie was the he was the more seasoned criminal. So he was actually already being looked at for a murder at another murder at the time.
And he was then convicted of that murder.
Yeah. So he'd already
he had a rap sheet. Yeah.
So they say that he was actually the lead.
Yeah.
But Lenny was the sort of the contact and organising it all.
So to this day, though, they don't actually know who pulled the trigger and whose bullets actually caused the harm.
And they all had guns. Yeah. And they all sort of have not come forward and really
they're not ratting on each other.
No.
The other, so there was Eric Cardy. He was known
Eric,
as,
not Eddie.
I don't know that. I think that was me. Sorry, it was Eric Cardy. He was known as Sniper.
Oh, I didn't know his nickname.
That was his nickname.
Right. Okay.
And then there was David Mel Vanagan.
I was like trying to get. Like, you did that one.
And I didn't actually find a nickname for him. So
no, I'm disappointed. All right.
So they were the three along with Eddie. So Eddie wasn't there on. Daniel wasn't there on the night.
No.
But he obviously had a hand in. He knew these criminals from his sort of drug connections and whatnot. But those three were the ones who
were in the house
and perpetrated the crime. They all, including Jennifer, all five went to trial together. So they were all charged with all the exact same crimes. So they were all charged with
first-degree murder,
attempted murder of Hann, and conspiracy to commit murder.
Yeah.
The trial was originally set. So I think they went to trial in, was it 2014? In March of 2014. It was slated to go for 5 months. It went for 10.
Yep.
They had countless witnesses, countless, testimonials and whatnot.
I think it was all the text messages they had
Yeah.
lined up. So there was all these messages that were like basically Jennifer saying, that they're good to go basically.
Yeah.
They could line up all the times of that with the CCTV footage they had of like them entering and exiting.
The other thing that was really interesting from the CCTV from the neighbour's house is like they were able to show that she signalled that it was time for them to come in by flicking a light on and off.
Yes.
They had so much that really went towards the fact that this was definitely premeditated and planned.
Yeah.
They all pleaded not guilty.
Yes.
Jennifer's case is that she actually wanted them to kill her and not her parents, because if she were to commit suicide because she felt so oppressed and whatever, that would actually bring shame on the family, and she didn't want to do that. So if she was murdered, that would avoid that situation for her family. To this day, that is her story. To this day, she maintains her innocence and that she didn't want her mother and father killed. But if that's the truth, why was she wandering around the house with the criminals while her mum and dad were in the basement about to get shot?
Yeah. Yep.
Girl, come on.
It doesn't actually line up.
Nothing lines up.
No, not with that. But
so eventually they were all convicted, bar one.
Yeah, Eric was, his lawyer during the trial fell ill. So he actually was then, it was given a mistrial for him. The others were all convicted of all the exact same thing, 25 years to life and
on all counts.
All counts.
Yep.
Eric then had to sit a new trial where he received, I think he only convicted on conspiracy.
Yeah, so he didn't go to trial. He pled guilty.
That's right, he pled guilty,
to conspiracy to commit
murder. And he was given 18 years for that, but he was also going to be in for 25 to life on this other murder that had occurred. So it was being added to that sentence. But unfortunately, in 2018, he was killed in jail. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us.
He's no longer with us.
So the other four remaining that have all received 25 years to life, they have just recently been given a retrial. So it's been found that in the first trial, unfortunately, the judge has not given the jury instructions that were appropriate. So he's given them quite narrow parameters.
He basically told them that they could only convict of what the charges were, as opposed to giving them alternatives for the murder charge.
Yeah, so technically, because he said you can only consider like two different stories being accurate. So basically, Jennifer's story of her that they were there to kill me, not my parents, couldn't be considered. he sort of only gave them these 2 options, so which meant that it narrowed that they could only be convicted of those outcomes, not like say manslaughter or something like that
Or
instead.
second degree murder.
Yeah. So I get why it's happened.
So
but
the retrial is only for the murder conviction.
Yes,
So the
yes.
conspiracy to commit and the
the
attempted murder still
stand.
stand.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting, and that they're actually serving all of those sentences concurrently. So if the murder charge is brought out, they can actually get out
earlier.
Yeah.
So there's been a date set, I believe, for June next year, 2025. So there'll be an update for this one.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's be very interesting to see what happens, because I'd hate to think, to be honest, that they get out. I'd love to hear your thoughts though on the fact that they've all been given at the moment 25 to life. Danny's role in this was literally, Jennifer, this is my mate homeboy, he'll help you out. Yeah, he was going to take some of the money, so I could definitely see conspiracy to murder there. But the other 2 charges, yes, he didn't report it to police again, but that's conspiracy. I don't know. What are your thoughts
maybe
on him
obstruction? That could be like they could have gotten him on a different charge,
because it gives me vibes of Gypsy Rose
Yep.
and Nick Godejohn.
Yep.
That the fact like Gypsy didn't get as high a sentence as Nick. I mean but then again, Jennifer didn't pull the trigger either. But she was the person who
I fully think Jennifer
so do I, and
should be convicted of all the things she was convicted of. Danny, on the other hand, I agree with what you're saying. I was actually quite surprised when I read that the 5 of them went to trial, because I can understand the 4, not including Danny.
They were all in that house.
And for different charges to be brought upon Danny. Absolutely. Like, he wasn't innocent in this. So he deserves some repercussions for his involvement. Absolutely. I don't get how he could get a murder charge.
Yeah.
I wonder what will happen, especially for him in this retrial.
Yeah. I'm really curious as if I've missed something, because I kept looking for something to kind of go, how did he get that? That doesn't quite marry up for me. And maybe in this retrial, maybe that will
It'll be interesting to see what comes out.
Yeah.
The other thing that came out of the trial at the end was that Hann and Felix requested a lifelong restraining order against Jennifer, and that was granted to them. So she is not allowed to make contact with them for the remainder of her life.
Yep.
And the court actually also imposed that she is not allowed to contact Danny Wong ever again as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably a really good thing. Let's keep those guys apart.
Yeah.
Jennifer is serving her time at the Grand Valley Institution for Women. And I guess, as you said, watch this space as to what comes next and what ends up happening.
I hope she's in there for life, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting. We'll maybe we'll do a bit more live in terms of when the trial goes live. We'll try and update as it goes.
Happens. Yeah, that sounds cool.
Yeah.
So I guess that comes to the end of the episode for today. It's been a bit of a long one, but they all are.
How do we get all this out of it? I don't know.
Our next episode, we're looking into Gabby Petito, and you were just saying before we hit record today that there's been a recent update and some new sort of evidence.
Just some more evidence has been released. Yeah, just some stuff, a video clip of what happened on the day of her disappearance being notified to police.
Okay.
So interesting little video clip that was released, and why that's been released now, I don't know.
Looking forward to getting into that one, because that hits hard.
Oh yeah.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you again for joining us on today's episode, and we really look forward to seeing you again next week.
Yes, see everyone next week. Stay curious, crime besties.